Expressing the unconditional love of Jesus to everyone. Growing in faith and love and bringing hope to our community. For more information, please visit our website, ercf.ca.
So excited to be starting this sermon series. The jumping off point each week will be including information from Mark Battison's book, Whisper. Great resource. If you want to read a wonderful book, that's a wonderful book to read. If you're a member of the church or you attend here, access to Right Now Media is available. Just go on our website, look under resources, and you can gain access to it, and a lot of great small group resources, kids resources, and the Whisper series is there. Well, just want to encourage you to avail yourself of that opportunity. I'm so excited about this week. I'm also excited about next week. Next week we've got some things to look forward to. Anybody know what's coming on next week? Nobody? Valentine's Day?
The Super Bowl?
We've got this confluence of these two events. The Super Bowl and Valentine's Day is coming up really quickly. Kind of in line also with what we're talking about. Did you understand, or maybe you've heard this before, about the fellow who he was a husband, and he went to his doctor and he said, "Listen, my wife, I'm thinking she's really losing her hearing." The doctor said, "Well, this is what I would suggest. You really do need to clarify if that's the case or not. So this is what you should do. You go up to your wife, and when her back is to you, and she can't see you, you say something to her. And if she doesn't respond, then just say it louder. And then just keep saying it louder until she responds, and then you'll know for sure what's going on." So that's what he did. His wife was in the kitchen. He walked up and got behind her, and it was near dinner time, so he said, "What's for supper?" No response. So he takes a little step forward. "What's for supper?" No response. So a third time, louder, "What's for supper?" And then she spun around, so animated with this look of frustration on her face, and she said, "For the third time, chicken and potatoes." Sometimes we think the other person's got the problem, and it's really us that's got the problem. So many years ago, I went to an audiologist to get my hearing checked, and I need to do that again. But I went to an audiologist many years ago, and took the test, and he said, and I mentioned to him that my wife had suggested that I come, and he said, "Well, your hearing's okay, but you would be amazed how many wives send their husbands to get hearing tests." Sometimes the problem is not the hearing, sometimes the problem is the listening. And sometimes there's a selective hearing issue. Over 50 years ago in France, there was a famous otolaryngologist. I had to look that word up myself. He's a specialist who focuses on the diseases of the ear, nose, and throat. And so he had a particular case come to him, which he'd never had before, and it was actually a very well-known opera singer. And so the otolaryngologist, his name was Dr. Alfred, we'll just call him Dr. Alfred. Tomatis is his name, Dr. Alfred Tomatis. And this opera singer was singing off-key. Now, a professional, well-known opera singer, starting to sing off-key, and the reason was there were a number of notes that he could no longer sing, even though they were well within his range, his vocal range. He had been to numerous doctors and audiologists, and everyone was trying to figure out what the voice problem was. And so Dr. Tomatis, he he didn't think it was a voice problem, and so he did a number of tests, one of them with a sonometer, which measures the intensity, the decibel value of his voice. And so this particular opera singer could project at 140 decibels measured at 1 meter distance. Now, just in terms of comparison, 140 decimeters is just a little bit louder than a jet fighter taking off from an aircraft carrier. So that's how loud he could sing. And in the cranium, it's magnified. So Dr. Automatus, he concluded that this man's volume had caused him to deafen himself. So he had selective deafness at a few different ranges, and selective deafness causing selective muteness. And so what he concluded was, what you can't hear, you can't say. There is these particular wavelengths where he had deafened himself by the sheer volume of his voice, and at those wavelengths, he could no longer hear. And because he couldn't hear, he couldn't sing, he couldn't speak at that particular frequency. Selective muteness was caused by selective deafness. The voice can only reproduce what the ear can hear. That is a quote from Dr. Automatus. And so all along, this opera singer was going to all these people, and they were looking at the symptoms, and they're trying to deal with the symptoms and the symptoms and the symptoms, and there was no relief until he found this doctor who diagnosed what the source of the problem was. It wasn't the voice, it was the hearing. Now, as it turns out, now there is something called the Automatus method, and there's a way to change and adjust and exercise the muscle of the ear to regain loss of speech because of loss of hearing. The Automatus method. What if we look at our life and we see there's a finance problem? What if the problem is not really finance? What if we have a relationship problem in our life and we need to understand that the problem may not be the relationship? What if you've got emotional problems in our life and we are misdiagnosing the problem, that our problem isn't really finances or relationships or emotion? Maybe the problem is a hearing problem. And so in this next series, as we look at Whisper, how to hear the voice of God, and I would just like to concur with Mark Batterson, the author of this book, to say that I also think that very often the problems in our life are symptoms of a deeper and bigger problem, that we are not hearing the voice of God. And perhaps our whole life is off key. This opera singer, he's singing off key. He's trying to find the note. He can't sing that note anymore. He's mute, selectively mute. He can't sing that note, and it slides down, and now he's off key. What if our life is off key? And the reason is that we've been deafened by negative self-talk. Maybe we are listening to the sound of criticism. Sometimes it's outward criticism. Often the way it starts is we experience this barrage of criticism as a young child, and it seeps in and it imprints on our soul, and it stays with us, and that's the overwhelming inner critic is developed. I know people that have that deep inner critic voice, and it doesn't matter how often you compliment that person about something that they're worthy of complimenting on. It doesn't matter how often you say it, they will not believe it, ever. And the reason? Because the inner voice is criticizing them. And no matter how you try to help and how you try to modify and how you try to show them that it's not true, that they're worthy, that they're loved, they just can't hear that because there is a deafening inner voice of criticism. The enemy's condemnation is overpowering. And to some degree or another, I think I can say with confidence, we all can identify with that. Some of us suffer from that. Some of us are actually debilitated by that. And here is the truth. We need to learn to silence these competing voices. And here is a startling question that we need to answer. Is God's voice the loudest voice in your life? Before I read this book, I don't think I've ever thought of that question, asked that question, read it anywhere. Is God's voice the loudest voice in my life? Makes me think, well, what are the voices in my life? There's all sorts of external noise that's coming every day, and it has a voice to it. There's the inner voices. There's a barrage of sounds and voices all around. Is God's voice the loudest voice in my life? And if the answer is no, then that's the problem. That's the problem. We need to hear God's voice to find our own voice. Now, the culture around us would take the phrase that I just spoke. The culture around us would take that idea about finding our own voice, and they'd say, oh yeah, that's what we need to do. We have to find our own voice. But what the culture means is that means I have to go inside of me, and I have to find out what I really think about things, how I feel, and how I'm feeling. That's the truth. That's what I need to express to everybody. That's my voice. I need to express how I'm feeling, and I need to tell you how I'm feeling. I need to go inside, and I have to kind of discern what I really think about this. And it doesn't matter what you say. What's really matters is what I say and what I'm thinking, and then I'm going to project that out to everybody, and that's my voice. Well, that's what the culture says. If you want to read a fascinating book, Carl Trueman's book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. And it actually goes back 300 years to the European philosophers and traces it all the way to the present day, and where we are today and what we think today and what our culture says today started off in seed form over 300 years ago, and it is no wonder that we're thinking the crazy things we're thinking today. So when I say we need to hear God's voice to find our voice, this is what I mean. We find the unique message that God wants to speak through our lives by hearing his voice. See, what it starts with surrendering my life to Christ. It comes to the point where I say, Jesus, you can be the Lord of my life. That's surrendering to the finished work that Jesus did on my behalf. That brings transformation. That's what the cross and resurrection is all about. And that transformation is forgiveness of sins and being brought into the family of God. Not because of anything that I've done, but because I've learned to receive what he's done for me. And part of that transaction is he fills me with his Spirit. Christ comes to live in me by his Spirit. Christ is in me. That's the hope of glory in my life. And now with Christ in me, my life becomes a life, as Galatians 2:20 says, of now yielding my life to him, because it's no longer I that live, it's Christ that lives in me. He has put an inheritance of himself in you and in me. And now it's a matter of letting him have his way by yielding. All right, with that bit of a background, let's read the second part again. We find the unique message that God wants to speak through our lives by hearing his voice. That's what I mean. Hear God's voice, you hear your voice. It's like Peter with all the disciples. And Jesus says, do you know what? There's a lot of buzz out there, a lot of people talking about me. And I want to ask you guys a question. Who does everybody think that I am? Oh, some think that you're John the Baptist, come back from the dead. Some people think you're actually Elijah the prophet. Some people even think you're Jeremiah the prophet that's come back. What about you? And Peter says, smartest thing I ever said, "You're the Christ. You are the promised one." He said, "Peter, flesh and blood didn't reveal that to you. And you didn't say that because you're so smart, Peter. But my Father pulled back the curtain. You got revelation. You got that from my Father. And I want to tell you this, Peter, your name is Cephas, and now you will be called Peter. They've called you Simon. Your name is Peter. You are the rock, and on that confession that you just gave, I'm going to build my church." In other words, summing it all up, Peter had a revelation about who Jesus was, and that revelation of who Jesus really was the source of Jesus telling Peter who he really was. You want to find out who you are? You want to find out what's ahead of you, what potential is in your life, what God's preferred future for you is? You want to find out all of the gifts be unraveled and unpacked and expressed in your life? How do you do that? You do that by finding out who Jesus is, and he will inform you who you really are. Hear his voice, and you will find your voice. Well, let's go to the scripture, and we're going to unpack a life-changing prayer we're going to take with us today. Starts in 1 Samuel chapter 3. The background of this is 11th century BC in ancient Israel. The Israelites have a temple. They've got a place where God resides in principle and symbol. His presence is there, symbolically represented by what was called the Ark of the Covenant. A lot of stuff woven into those couple of words, but for our story, what we have to know is the leader of the time was this old priest named Eli. There had been this wonderful woman of God who had been barren and was asking God for a child, and God miraculously provided. In her gratitude, she said, "Okay, I want to give this child for the Lord's service." And so as a little boy, this child then named Samuel was brought to the temple to work and help out this old man Eli. And so he was there, and he went home on occasion, but he spent most of his time with Eli. And so that's the setting of our story. It's nighttime. Eli's gone to bed. The lamp has been put out. The lamp of God, they call it, has been put out, and little Samuel's gone to bed too. So we pick up the story, 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 2. One day, Eli, whose eyesight was failing, he was going blind, he was lying in his room, and before the lamp of God had gone out, Samuel was lying down in the tabernacle of the Lord. That's where the ark of the Lord was located. Then the Lord called the little boy, Samuel. And he answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." I didn't call you. Eli replied, "Go back and lie down." So he went and lied down. And once again, the Lord called, "Samuel." Like, I wish they had video, audio. What was that? "Samuel. Samuel. Samuel." Anyways, called again. He says, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli, and "Here I am, you called me." I didn't call you," replied Eli. "Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. So this is the third time now. Once again, the Lord called Samuel. Samuel got up, went to Eli, said, "Here I am. You called me." "I didn't call, my son," he replied. "Go back and lie down." Now Samuel had not yet experienced the Lord, because the word of the Lord had not been revealed to him. And once again, so this is the third time now, the Lord called Samuel, and he went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." And Eli understood that the Lord was calling the boy. So this is what he told Samuel: "Go and lie down. If he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Now I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, obviously he's very attentive. He heard every single time. So what's the big deal? Why didn't God just start talking to him? And I think the reason is found in the text. I don't think we have to explain. I think we just have to read the text. See, he jumped up and he went to Eli. It wasn't that he didn't hear, because he did hear. That's why he went to Eli. But he misunderstood. He misunderstood that it was God that was calling him. He misunderstood the intent. Why? He never had experience with God yet. I've heard many, many times people say, well, God never speaks to me. My friend, yes, he does. He's always speaking to you. Sometimes it's not every day, every moment, but God is speaking. The problem is we do not recognize the voice as the voice of God. We think it's something else. We think it's us. We think it's just people. We think it's just some circumstances. And because we don't understand, because we've never had that experience, because we don't know his voice in this particular scenario that we find ourselves in, we misinterpret and we miss it. And what God wants us to know is to know his voice so we don't miss when he speaks to us. And so Samuel went down, lying to lay down again, and the Lord came. I love it, this fourth time. The phraseology is different. If you notice, the Lord came, he stood there, and he called as before, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel responded, speak, for your servant is listening. And you'll want to go back and read the whole chapter. And here's the prayer that I want to start to pray, and I want to encourage all of us to start to pray with a new understanding. Speak, Lord, I'm listening. If you go back to Samuel's story, God said something to Samuel he didn't want to hear. God said something to Samuel for somebody else, and he didn't want to tell that person. And part of my problem, and by extension, I'm wondering if we are all a little bit the same. Part of my issue, see, I could just pray that prayer easily, but to understand the implication is that maybe God's going to say something I don't want to hear, and maybe that's why I'm not listening really well, because I'm actually afraid of what he's going to say. Just think about that. Just let the uncomfortable prospect just wave and waft over your soul for a moment in the discomfort. What if he's going to say something you don't want to hear? Are you open for that? Are you really listening? Are you ready? Because if we're not willing to hear everything he has to say, eventually we won't hear anything he has to say. Over a lot of years, worked with young people and was one myself, believe it or not. And why didn't God tell us, like Brian mentioned earlier, he said, become like little children. Why didn't he say become like teenagers? You ever wonder that? After all, the time of maximum brain activity is between 4 and 14. Did you understand that? At 4, they have all the questions. At 14, all the answers. Sorry, teenagers, I'm kidding. But in being a teenager myself and working with teenagers through the years, sometimes teenagers will say, my dad especially, my dad, I asked him for some advice, but he wouldn't give it to me. Well, that's because, you wouldn't take it. That's because it falls on deaf ears. That's because it's easy to ask, but to do it is another issue. When it comes to God, if we're not willing to hear everything, then our heart and our ears become hardened, the Bible says, and consequently we don't hear anything that he's got to say. Is it possible that you have turned a deaf ear to God's voice? Is it possible, like that, the story of the husband and the wife, is it possible that the problem is not that God won't speak to you? might it be possible that you won't hear him? That you're not willing, and so, of course, you can't hear him. Many of us relate to God out of fear. Even though I know better, I know better, but that doesn't mean that inside that's not my response. And here's the thing. See, if that's part of my relationship with God, for whatever reason, who cares what the reason is? If somehow I'm relating to God with there's this modicum of fear in me as I think about God, and as a consequence, that modicum, that little bit of fear, it sort of pollutes my motivation, and now I don't want him to talk to me because I am afraid what he's going to tell me. Because I don't think he's going to talk to me like a little child. He's going to talk to me like I'm a teenager or a young adult that needs to be corrected about something. I'm actually kind of afraid of what he's going to say to me. So he wants us to come as little kids, children. Why is that? Because if the relationship is proper, a baby in arms, a little toddler, the smallest of the children, there's no fear. They can look in your eyes without blinking. See, if I come up to you and you look in my eyes for like 40 seconds without blinking, then I know there's a big problem and I'm feeling very uncomfortable. Just try that after the service. Just go up to somebody and stare. Don't blink. They will turn away. They will blink. Well, what is it about little kids that can do that? It's this feeling of intimacy. There's no fear. Lack of fear, it promotes and it allows intimacy to happen. See, if I'm carrying a little grandchild, like we've got this little guy named Lawrence, and I'm holding him, just a little guy. Well, you know what? And grandparents, or parents, you can attest to this as well. Like, he doesn't care. He will reach into my mouth and grab my mouth with his hand. Like, not everybody can do that. So, there's a select few people I will allow to do that. The little grandchildren, they can do it. My wife, but she doesn't want to. So it's a very, very limited group of people. Well, and so fear makes me think he's going to say something that I know has been true all along, and I'm so afraid that he's going to tell me, Jim, you're really messing up. You're really, really messing up. See, I know that so badly. I know that. I know it so clearly. But for him to say it, I don't want him to say it. I know he's going to. So I'm just, no one else knows. Well, not that everybody knows I'm messing up, but see, no one else knows that I'm dealing with this. But when I come to him, I actually don't want to hear what he has to say. And so it is so interesting. It's the apostle that was the one that leaned against the bosom of Jesus. It was the youngest of the apostles, John, who had that intimacy with Jesus. In fact, he had so much intimacy with Jesus at the Last Supper. He was the one leaning against the chest of Jesus. And Peter had a question for Jesus, but Peter did not have the confidence to ask the question himself. So he said to John, ask Jesus this question. And it was that apostle, John, who writes to us, and he says, there is no fear in love. Perfect love casts out fear. See, God whispers for a reason. He whispers because to hear, we have to draw close. When we draw close and closer and closer, then we not only hear his voice, but we can hear his heart. And when we hear his heart and not just his voice, it will transform us. Many years ago, I participated, it was the University of London, I was Western. I was there for a year, and I participated in. Looking back now, it was, some people could look on it as something that was terribly bad, fraught with psychological abuse, as we took these little helpless participants in a psychological study looking at abnormal imprinting, and they may look at it as a terrible, terrible thing that I participated in. Actually, it was pretty fun. It was a bunch of little chicks. Terrible because any chick that ends up thinking I am their mother and starts to follow me, there's something terribly wrong with that. But anyways, back in 1973, I think that one of the Nobel Prizes was awarded to an Austrian biologist who came up with, working with geese and this whole concept of psychological imprinting. And so, as it is with many newborns in the animal kingdom, but specifically talking about geese, the sound of the mother's voice is imprinted psychologically on the chick. And so they will follow that voice. Like, I'm thinking of emperor penguins. Can you imagine how confusing it would be to be a baby penguin? You just look up and, whoa! Like it's Finding Waldo all over again in black and white. Well, it's not a problem because there is a unique sound that we can't distinguish, but the baby can distinguish, and imprinting takes place, and that little baby will follow the voice. No matter how many other voices there are, they will follow that voice. And so with a little chick, there's a way to do it. If they're separated from their mother at birth, then you actually what happens is you make a particular sound, which I'm not going to tell you what the sound is. It's a secret sound. So you make a particular sound. Actually, it doesn't matter what the sound is, but you make it the same sound. And then what you do is you set up small hindrances which necessitate that this little chick has to overcome a very slight issue, problem, a hindrance, and then you encourage them and you increase the size of the obstacle until following you and following that sound is increasingly difficult, and that process makes imprinting take place. And then, yes, you can make this weird sound, and the little chick will follow you because they think that you are the mother. Again, there's something very abnormally wrong about that. However, that's the way it is. Now, this is my point right here. The point is, abnormal imprinting has taken place in your life. And there's other voices that you're following, and I'm following. And we're not even consciously thinking of it. And actually, the good thing is, the great thing is, we don't understand that when we were regenerated, Jesus imprinted on our soul his voice. And Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice, and they will follow me. So we gotta understand what's going on, what's the dynamic, and the devil's trying to confuse us with all these other voices. But if we will just quiet them, if we will just allow ourselves to be still, if we will push aside the lies and those other voices, and we will attune ourselves to the ears of God, then we will be able to discern, and we will experience him and be able to discern that what we're hearing is actually the voice of God. And that whisper will change us. It was in August 1928, a little girl was born in Brooklyn. Marianne Bird was her name. Marianne suffered from an extreme cleft palate. And the poor little kid had to undergo 17 painful surgeries. But you know what? The pain of the surgeries wasn't the deepest pain that she felt. She was born completely deaf in one ear. And so her school life was miserable, and it was the pain of being teased and bullied and tormented by all the kids that made school just a terrible experience for her. But actually there was one day in the school year that was the worst day of all. That was the day of the hearing test. Now, this is way back in 1928. It was very simple. They don't do it anymore, so let me explain to you how it worked. Very simply, the students are called up one by one, and the teacher would just whisper to them, and they would have to repeat what the teacher said. Like, your shoes are blue. You're wearing a black dress. It's a nice day. Something very simple, but it gave the teacher a little bit of idea of the hearing issue, and Marianne hated that day. Miss Leonard was her teacher that particular year, and so when it was Marianne's turn, she was knowing she was going to be humiliated. She was so hating the experience, and she cupped her hand around her good ear. So the teacher whispered, I wish you were my little girl. In her biography, she says, God put those 7 words into the mouth of my teacher, and it changed my life forever. I wish you were my little girl. Jesus, by what he did on the cross and his invitation to come without earning anything, his invitation to us to just receive the free gift is his whisper to you. I wish you were my son. I wish you were my daughter. Oh, to just let that sink in. Just to take that and to believe it and to know it. To recognize that the voice of Jesus has been imprinted on our soul. And when we come to him, he's not going to be whispering about all of our failures. He's not going to be whispering about our shortcomings. He's not going to be whispering about the terrible things that he's done, that we have done. Because our sins and our shortcomings and our failures, all of those things have been taken and nailed to the cross of Calvary. And now we've been washed clean by the blood of Jesus in his sight. And so he's just saying to us, I'm so glad that you're my son. I'm so glad that you're my daughter. That is the first whisper that we're going to hear. And when we hear that, it transforms our soul. And yes, of course, there'll be other things he says to us that in some ways we don't want to hear. But the foundational thing is God loves me. That'll never change. There's nothing I can do to make him love me more. Nothing I can do to make him love me less. And based on that, then yes, when I know that is true, then I can hear anything. Just in concluding, though we're deafened by voices of conformity and criticism and condemnation, and we're suffering their side effects of loneliness and shame and anxiety, still you bear his image. You are imprinted by his voice. And now perhaps you would join with me in praying this prayer, and let's make it a daily, moment-by-moment prayer. Lord, speak, I'm listening. Let's stand together, and whether you're here in the building or online, God wants to set the stage to teach us more perfectly and accurately to hear his voice. And let's be sure of this. His voice is speaking to us in tones of love. And if we will open up and hear and listen, our lives will be transformed. The prayer that can change our lives is, speak, Lord, I'm listening. Let's pray that together. Lord, as simple as this is, we are just saying, speak, Lord, we're listening. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for what you've done and who you are. And we are anticipating a new chapter opening up as we are listening to hear you speak. In Jesus' name, and everybody said, amen. Well, thank you so much for being here, again, whether online or in the building. God bless you. Let's be listening for his voice this week. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching today, and if you enjoyed this, there's all kinds of other videos on our channel we'd love for you to explore, and it really helps if you would like and subscribe to our channel, and in so doing it helps us to spread the word and get the message of God's word out to more people in a more efficient way. And thank you so much for doing that. Looking forward to seeing you again soon. Bye now.